Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Continuing on with the draft preview series, I'm going to be covering the AFC East for the next couple of days. Of course, we've got the draft on Thursday, so getting close to the end of this series now. This episode will be focusing on the Buffalo Bills. For those of you who have not seen one of these episodes before, what I'll be doing is going through the team's major needs with free agency essentially having wrapped up for Thursday's draft, and going through the first 3 rounds, offering up suggestions for players that will likely be available and possibly considered to address those spots, as well as some other needs the team may have with each of those picks. So for the Bills, the 3 primary team needs I've got listed at the moment are the wide receiver spot. Now they've got Sammy Watkins on the roster. If he can stay healthy, I think he's a good player. However, having lost Robert Woods and Marquise Goodwin, who weren't great by any means, but were contributors, that opens up a big spot there. Definitely need to try and find someone who can step in and contribute right away in the receiving game. On top of that, we've got the cornerback spot with Stephon Gilmore having left. That leaves a big void in the Buffalo secondary. Definitely believe they need to try and find another starting cornerback over the course of the weekend. And also the inside linebacker spot. Zach Brown played very well for the team last year. He's gone. Reggie Ragland, didn't contribute as a rookie. Hopefully he'll be a high impact player for them, but just in case, sometimes it can take a while for these players to recover from that kind of knee injury. Might not be the same player this year. And on top of that, he's still not played in the NFL. So I do believe they need to try and find another inside linebacker. Also, in my first round mock, I have the Buffalo Bills going with, let me just check, Deshaun Watson. I have a bit of my initial mock, which I will be updating on Wednesday, hopefully before Mayock's mock comes out. Don't want the accusations of copying him there. Deshaun Watson, I had a bit of a run on quarterbacks. I'm not so sure that's actually going to be the case now, or at least not that early in the first round. But I certainly think it's possible. The team brass still doesn't seem overly convinced on Tyrod Taylor, so I wouldn't rule quarterback out as a possibility. I also think the receivers will certainly be considered. Mike Williams will certainly warrant a lot of consideration, you'd think, from the front office at that spot. Not sure Corey Davis or John Ross are necessarily good value at that spot, so I feel if Mike Williams isn't available, I feel they'll look to pick up a receiver in the second, possibly the third. Other players they could look at, I think Reuben Foster, if he falls to them, which is certainly possible, I think he would be considered. I think some of the pass rushers, I think their edge rush, it could certainly be improved. Guys like Taco Charlton, and they could certainly warrant some consideration here. Derek Barnett, Charles Harris has apparently risen up a lot of draft boards. I think if Solomon Thomas gets here, I think he's likely the pick based on upside. And the other consideration I think would be the cornerback spot. Marlon Humphrey seems to have fell down some draft boards from what I've seen. Some of the mock drafts that have been more recent. Previously you had him and Lattimore as sort of consensus top 10 picks. So it looks like Humphrey will be available. I don't think Lattimore will. However, if he is, I think they would likely snap him up. Gary Conley is another guy who stock seems to have risen exponentially in the last month. He could warrant consideration here if Lattimore is not on the board, which I definitely do not expect him to be. So a lot of ways the Bills could go with the 10th overall pick. Heading into the second, this is where I think a receiver is most likely to be taken. Chris Godwin could be a consideration. Juju Smith-Schuster if they want to go for a bigger receiver. Curtis Samuel, I think he'd certainly want to consider. I think they're the most likely receivers. Who knows? John Ross with the injury may even be available. I don't think that's particularly likely, but it's certainly possible, and I think he'd definitely garner consideration if he were. In terms of corners, hard to know who'll be available. Seems to be a lot of movement in where people think some of whether there's going to be a run on these guys. Adoree Jackson's a bit of a wild card in terms of where he goes. Better athlete than player. Fabian Moreau and Sidney Jones both have injuries, but they're both really high-end talents, I think, for a pick in this range. I think they could both certainly be considered. Zay Jones is another wide receiver. I think he's probably off the board at this point, but I think he'd be definitely worth a pick if he was there. It could even look to address the tight end spot. Charles Clay's okay, but I think a guy like Evan Ingram would certainly be an upgrade at this point. Again, if some of the talented pass rushers fall to them at this point, I think they would also garner consideration. However, I don't think that's likely. It seems to be a lot of guys sort of rising more than anything. Guys like Tyrese Bowser, Takaris McKinley is a bit of a wild card. I'm not sure where he'll go. He may be available at this spot, and he'd certainly be worth looking into. Jordan Willis as well. Heading into the third, I think this is where finding some more defensive linemen might start to also enter consideration. A guy like Dalvin Tomlinson, who I mocked to them, I think that's certainly possible. Brantley and McDowell remain wild cards at this point. I've seen them sliding even further in mock drafts lately, so I think they could be available here. Davis Webb, if they want to pick up a quarterback a little bit later, I think there's a possibility he'll be here. He may be taken in the second. They may need to go for him there to guarantee getting him. Pass rusher like Derek Rivers, I could see might be a bit high for him, but I don't know what the board's going to look like at this point. I suspect there won't be a huge amount of pass rushers left. And again, the receiver spot, guys like Malachi Duper, Cooper Kupp could both be available, and I think would be decent selections at this point in time. Kupp in particular is someone who I think can start day one and contribute as a solid possession receiver. And again, the corners, I don't know if Akielo Witherspoon will be available. Similarly with some safeties, it's a lot of fluidity, it seems, in the lead up to the draft as to how high a lot of these corners are going to be taken. So what do you guys think, Bills fans? Do you agree with my assessment of the needs for this team? I think this is a team that, especially in terms of Tyrod Taylor's future, needs to push for the playoffs next season. There's pieces in the roster that could certainly be done. I think with a really good draft, this team could do some damage next season. Let me know what you think. Any particular players you want to see taken Thursday, Friday? Let us know below in the comments section. Find us on Facebook at Cover Zero, or find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. I'll do my best to respond to any who do get in touch. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, I recommend checking out some more. I'm going to have the AFC East and West done by Thursday, or on Thursday. I'll be finishing those up. Be getting a mock draft up on Wednesday. I'm not going to cover all 7 rounds, just going to go through the first 3, and that will be, I assume, heavily different to my initial draft. There's quite a lot more information available, so I recommend checking those out. As always, if you've enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. It would be thoroughly appreciated. It's been a pleasure as always. Thanks for your time. Have a good day, and go Bucks.